Have you ever stopped to think about how certain cities can be so, let's say, challenging to the eyes of some? Well, if in the last video we talked about countries, today the conversation is about specific cities. Prepare your heart, because today's list is not the most encouraging. There are places that are so ugly that even the Google Street View car tries to pass by quickly. Cities that look like the setting of an urban nightmare. And no, we're not just talking about poverty or crime. These are cities that are tiring just to look at. No charm, no harmony, no corner to save the view. With air pollution, falling wires, crooked buildings, traffic that doesn't move, and a color palette that ranges from gray to dirty brown. It's the complete visual chaos combo. Today on Bello Mundo, we're going to take you on a tour in reverse. No paradise beaches or charming villages. The focus here is on the ugliest cities in the world, those that have become benchmarks for urban disorganization, architectural bad taste, and a total lack of planning. If you think you've seen a messy city, wait until you get to our top one, because there are places here that look like they were put together on the fly and continue to function on sheer stubbornness. Number 10. Manila, Philippines. We start in Southeast Asia with a classic example of urban chaos. Manila, a city with more than 13 million inhabitants squeezed into a space that has been saturated for decades. Growth there happened quickly, without rules, without logic, and without regard for the landscape. The result is a metropolis that looks like a random jumble of everything. Slums stretch as far as the eye can see, with houses stacked like poorly fitted blocks. The general rule was simple: build fast, spend little, and hope it doesn't collapse. Aesthetics? They've never even seen it. And the air? On certain days, the smog is so thick that you can barely see the horizon. But that's not fog, it's smoke. Traffic is constantly at a standstill, horns honk endlessly, and the rivers that cut through the city have become open sewers. Of course, the place has its history, its museums, and there are even people who argue that there is charm in the chaos. But the view is harsh. It's the kind of place that doesn't go well with Instagram filters because there's no angle that can save it. Manila isn't ugly by accident. It's ugly because they let it grow without care, without planning, and without any attention to detail. And today it has become a symbol of what happens when a city explodes before it is ready for it. Number 9. Tegucigalpa, Honduras. From Asia to Central America, we arrive in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. And here, history repeats itself, only in another language. The city lies in a valley surrounded by mountains, which could be a postcard-worthy setting. But in reality, it has become yet another example of disorganized urban chaos. The buildings climb up the hillsides without any criteria, as if someone had thrown the houses up there and left them where they landed. There are no decent sidewalks, no color, no rhythm. Everything is crooked, improvised, and neglected. The center tries to show some dignity with colonial buildings, but everything is worn, peeling, and abandoned. To make matters worse, there is the issue of safety. Tegucigalpa regularly appears in crime rankings, and the basic recommendation is always the same. After dark, don't walk the streets. Tourism there is almost formal. You pass through because you have to, not because you want to. Visually, the city is tiring. It looks like it was never finished, and at the same time, it's already too old to try to fix. What was supposed to be a vibrant capital has become a collage of poorly resolved urban problems. And the truth is that Tegucigalpa could have been beautiful, but they didn't let it be. Number 8. Chisinau, Moldova. Continuing our journey, we now cross the ocean and land in Eastern Europe, more precisely in Moldova, to visit Chisinau, the country's capital. The city has a curious name whose origin no one can say for sure, but there is a popular theory there. They say it comes from two words in ancient Romanian, Cisla, which means water source, and no, which means new. Together they would form something like new source. Nice, right? Except that in practice, the last thing Chisinau seems like is new or refreshing. The impression you get is that someone decided to pause the city clock back in the 1970s and never came back to press play. The residential blocks that dominate the skyline are all the same, all gray, all heavy. It's as if they used the same Soviet mold to build the entire city without any creativity or concern for appearance. To make matters worse, many of these buildings are on the verge of collapse. Peeling facades, staircases that are scary just to look at, elevators that haven't worked in decades, and streets that always lead nowhere. A strong earthquake that struck the city in 1977 only added to the feeling of general abandonment. Many structures were never restored, remaining in a perpetual state of, "one day we'll fix it." Tourists are so rare that they attract attention. Those who pass through are usually just passing through and are unlikely to recommend it. It is a city that carries a historical burden too heavy to hide with makeup. Number 7. Luanda, Angola. Here we have a rare case of extreme urban imbalance. Luanda has managed the feat of being both one of the most expensive and one of the ugliest cities in the world. And that's no exaggeration. With just over 9 million inhabitants, the Angolan capital experienced an oil boom that enriched a portion of the population. However, instead of bringing harmonious modernization, what we saw was a disorderly explosion of construction. Everyone built whatever they wanted, however they wanted, wherever there was space left. The result is an urban Frankenstein. Luxury buildings stuck next to slums, new skyscrapers surrounded by decaying colonial buildings, and streets that don't fit in with their surroundings. It's a city where the architecture seems improvised, as if appearance were the last item on the list of priorities. And then there's the price. In many ways, living in Luanda costs more than living in Paris. But the visual return, shall we say, does not match the investment. Social inequality is glaring and visible on every block. The contrast between extreme wealth and deep poverty transforms everyday life into an uncomfortable portrait of poorly distributed progress. And that's not me talking. It's the residents and former residents themselves. Just look at what this person wrote on Reddit. It's a city that seems unfinished, confusing, and exhausting, even for those who try to defend it. Number 6. Caracas, Venezuela. In 6th place, we arrive in Caracas, Venezuela. Caracas is one of those cities that hurts, not only visually, but in the soul of those who know its history. It was once a symbol of modernity in South America, with wide avenues and buildings that were once postcard images. Today, it is almost unrecognizable. With around 3 million inhabitants, the capital of Venezuela is a living portrait of a never-ending crisis. The urban landscape is dominated by hills, crowded with slums, with houses stacked like unstable blocks in a dangerous game. The colors of the facades try to bring life, but they cannot hide the precariousness that dominates everything. In the center, the neglect is visible. Abandoned commercial buildings, shattered windows, facades that lost their luster decades ago. It is the kind of city where time seems to have stopped, but decay has continued to advance. And then there's the infrastructure, or rather the lack thereof. There's no water, no electricity, and plenty of insecurity. The traffic lights don't work, the streets are full of potholes, and public transportation is a daily challenge. Caracas had everything to be beautiful. It has mountains, history, and a vibrant Latin energy. But today it's just another sad reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. Number 5. São Paulo, Brazil. Continuing our tour of South America, we now arrive in Brazil to talk about São Paulo, the land of drizzle. São Paulo is huge, complex, and frenetic. It is the city that never sleeps, fueling the country's economy and home to 12 million people. But let's be honest, beauty has never been its strong point. It's a sea of concrete, and that's not an exaggeration. There are buildings as far as the eye can see, tall, short, modern, old, well-maintained, or falling apart, all mixed together in an architectural mess that looks like a collage made in a hurry. Visual pollution is a war in itself. Signs, billboards, wires, poles, antennas, graffiti, and protest banners compete for the attention of those walking down the streets. The city seems to be screaming all the time, and it doesn't help that the sky in São Paulo is always covered by a gray haze, courtesy of pollution. And the rivers, the Tietê and Pinheiros, are still there, visible, but they have become true symbols of environmental neglect. Polluted to the core, they cut through the city like dark scars on the urban map. Even so, São Paulo is alive. It's ugly, but it has identity. It's the kind of place that wins you over with its intensity rather than its looks. Those who live here learn to love the chaos, because deep down, this ugliness has a charm that only those who live here can explain. Number 4. Nairobi, Kenya. Leaving Brazil, we cross the Atlantic and arrive in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, to understand how a city can be both a symbol of growth and an example of urban chaos. With over 4 million inhabitants, Nairobi tries to be modern, tries to be vibrant, but its appearance reveals a city that has grown more in haste than in care. The center has some mirrored buildings, skyscrapers, and luxury hotels. But just turn a corner and you'll find yourself in a maze of makeshift buildings, huge slums, and traffic that looks more like a game of survival. Matatus, colorful vans that serve as informal public transportation, contribute to the local identity, but also add to the noise, chaos, and congestion of the streets. The suburbs are huge, with tin houses, narrow alleys, and open sewers. In neighborhoods like Kibera, one of the largest informal settlements in Africa, the city reveals such brutal inequality that even the asphalt seems to distinguish between classes. Nairobi is noisy, congested, polluted, and visually exhausting. The contrast between the business center and the misery of the surrounding areas is shocking, and the urban landscape seems made up of disconnected pieces. It is the kind of city that tries to run before it learns to walk, and the result is this rushed, heavy, hard-to-swallow look. Number 3. Tijuana, Mexico. In third place, we head to the Mexican border. There we find Tijuana. Right next to the United States, it should be a showcase for modern Mexico. But in practice, what you see is a chaotic mix of everything that has gone wrong in terms of urban planning. With over 2 million inhabitants, the city grew haphazardly. Houses sprouted up the hillside, one on top of the other, with no pattern, no criteria, and no concern for aesthetics. The impression is that the city was put together in a hurry to meet a deadline, and never had time to stop and look in the mirror. The visual pollution is a spectacle in itself. There are advertising signs everywhere, wires hanging like spider webs, and an excess of colors that don't match, don't blend, just clash. It's as if each street had been painted by a different person with a bucket of paint in their hand and zero guidance. The suburbs are unsafe, poorly structured, with broken sidewalks and the smell of sewage in the air. And even in central areas, the feeling is one of permanent chaos. Tijuana is the kind of city that seems like it was never finished. It's noisy, disorganized, and aesthetically exhausting. It's not charming, it's not welcoming, and it's definitely not pretty. Number 2. Dhaka, Bangladesh. Taking the silver medal, we now move on to Asia. If there is a city that represents urban collapse in its purest form, that city is Dhaka. The capital of Bangladesh has more than 20 million inhabitants squeezed into a space that could not hold half that number. It is chaos that begins with the visual and extends to everything that involves daily life. Architecture is practically non-existent. Buildings are stuck together, built with cheap materials, many unfinished, with exposed wires, visible leaks, and a visual pattern that borders on apocalyptic. It looks like each structure was made with what was left over from the previous building. Traffic is a war. Cars, motorcycles, rickshaws, and old buses fight for space on asphalt that barely exists. Honking has become the official language. And the air? It's simply unbreathable. Pollution is so intense that on many days the city ranks among the most toxic on the planet. The rivers that run through Dhaka are among the most polluted in the world. Garbage floats, chemical foam covers the surface, and the smell of rot fills the air. It is no exaggeration to say that clean water has become a luxury item. Dhaka is noisy, dirty, overcrowded, and ugly. The feeling is that the city is always on the verge of exploding from so much accumulated urban stress. It is ugly from every angle. There is no respite, no visual relief, no charm whatsoever. Number 1. Detroit, United States. And at the top of our list with all its merits, or demerits, is Detroit. The city that once symbolized the American dream, and today has become a brutal portrait of how that dream can crumble. Detroit isn't just ugly, it's ghostly. It's the kind of city where you can hear the silence screaming. Just walk down a few streets to understand that an empire once existed there, and that empire collapsed. In the 50s, Detroit was a powerhouse. It was home to Ford, GM, and Chrysler. It was a symbol of industry, progress, and the American middle class. But dependence on the automotive sector became a curse. The crisis hit, factories closed, jobs disappeared, and with them, more than half the population. Today, Detroit has less than 700,000 inhabitants. But the size of the city remains the same. What remains are entire abandoned neighborhoods, houses falling apart, buildings overgrown with weeds, closed schools with desks still piled up. It is a city that seems to have stopped in time. In some places, it looks like a silent apocalypse has passed through and left everything frozen. The city center is trying to bounce back, with new projects and young people creating cool stuff. But there's not enough light to shine through all the shadows. Detroit is scary, sad, and impressive, because its cracked concrete carries with it a whole history of rise and fall. It's the ugliest city in the world not because it was born ugly, but because it was forgotten. And when you see this neglect up close, it hurts. And so we close our not-so-cheerful list of the 10 ugliest cities in the world. So, what did you think? Do you agree with the ranking? Do you think we were unfair to any city? Have you visited any of these places and have a different opinion? Leave us a comment because we love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share with your friends, and subscribe here at Bello Mundo. Because we love exploring the world in all its facets, from the most beautiful to the most, shall we say, challenging. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you in the next video.